All right. Hello and welcome everyone to the basic modding overview. In this video, I'm going to teach you how to mod basically. By the end of it, we're going to have talked about all of the builds for the starter Warframes you're going to have access to pretty much right out of the tutorial. In addition, you're going to know how weapon modding generally works and should be pretty ready for anything that Warframe is going to throw at you within your first 100 hours or so. For that, this video is for the critical progression route. If you don't know what the CPR is, it is released as of the day this video has launched, and this is over on Brozime.com. Basically, what this is it is a gigantic guide to all of the major and required things you're going to be doing as you go through the game, alongside some optional objectives like crafting the Vectus to help you get more powerful and get through the game, currently all the way up to the War Within. With that, I am going to, of course, be expanding this out to cover everything in the whole game, and you can expect this to, in relatively short order, probably be expanded to the most recent main story quest and getting everyone up to that point. So this is the thing I'm working on. Come check it out. It's supported by the Patreon. Very much appreciate all you guys over there. And now let's get back to mods and talking about them. We're going to go to very basic level, so let's look at our max rank mag. So max rank is 30. Almost all of the games in Warframe have a max rank of 30. And that is going to translate exactly to what your capacity is. If you have an item that's ranked 10, you'll have 10 capacity as a baseline, and as it ranks up, you'll get more capacity, giving you the ability to have more power whenever you add mods to the item. So that's how you get capacity. In addition, you can double your capacity by using Orokin reactors on your Warframes and companions, and then Orokin catalysts on all of your weapons in order to double the amount of capacity that you have at any given level. If you are rank 15, you'll get 30 points at rank 15, and at rank 30, you'll have 60 points. Those can just be normally farmed or purchased or whatever you'd like to do. In addition, let's talk about what's actually on a mod. So we'll talk about stretch here. In the top right, you can see that it costs 9. The top right is its cost. And just to the right of that, you can see its polarity. That symbol is usually what we call dash, but its name is Naramon. And then we have also Vazarin, which we usually call D. And then we also have Matarai, which we usually call V. These are the basic polarities. There are a couple more, but they're not super worth getting into. Those are the main three you're usually going to be interacting with. Otherwise on this mod, you can see its name and effect, of course, stretch and 45% ability range. And then at the very bottom, you can see the little pips. Those are all filled in currently, telling you that this is a rank 5 mod and that its maximum rank is also 5. That will vary from mod to mod. You can see here on Equilibrium, it is rank 4 and has 6 more ranks, so it can go up to a total of 10. And then in addition to that, you have kind of the general rarity on these mods, which is common, uncommon, and rare. And then these are more rare mods, essentially. They're primes. But with that, the only thing that really affects, as the actual color of the mod doesn't translate really directly to how actually rare they are, but it does increase the cost it's going to cost you in terms of upgrading those mods. But before we get to all that, let's talk about the other aspects of this, which is that as you increase the power of mods, their cost is going to go up. So let's take this antitoxin as a good example. If we jump out of this menu and head over to our modding station, which there's also a shortcut to from the arsenal I'll show momentarily, we can grab our antitoxin, and this is where you can do a lot of upgrading and where you're going to be doing, well, all your upgrading really. Grab the antitoxin, and we can go to the fusion menu. You can also sell or dissolve mods here. Generally speaking, selling or dissolving mods, you're usually going to go dissolve. But if you need to sell mods in order to purchase something that you want, it's not going to be a big deal. The only thing that I would generally advise to you is that you don't sell your last copy of a mod, as then you won't have any copies of it. But let's jump into fusion. So this is the fusion menu. You can see we are unranked currently. Then we go to rank 1. Our cost went from 4 to 5. But in terms of our effect, we got 7.5 up to 15% toxin resistance. Of note, antitoxin is a horrible mod, but I'm just using it as an example here. Then we get another 7.5 of our toxin resistance every single level, up until we're maxed out at 45% toxin resistance. So we did a little more than doubled the cost of the mod, but its effectiveness has been multiplied by 5, making it considerably stronger. In addition to that, on the right here, you can see the cost for this, which is going to be endo and credits, and that escalates each rank. Basically, it doubles essentially every time you do it, is usually the thing. But at these like lower ranked and lower rarity mods, it's less of that and more just it's a bit less of an increase for lower ranked mods and such like that. But as you rank it up, it will cost more and more per rank. You can see going from 300 to 620 at the final rank. That will generally apply across all the mods. So putting a couple ranks in is going to be much cheaper than just going all the way. But of course, you're going to have to do other things to accommodate. With that out of the way, you kind of know what a mod looks like. So let's talk about what you're going for on a Warframe, talking specifically about the starters and talking only really about mods you're going to have very early on. So this is an example of an early game build that you can get for your Warframe. For Mag specifically, we are talking about using Pistol Amp. So Pistol Amp is a special mod. This actually gives us mod points instead because it is an aura. So if we take out this continuity here and we drop Pistol Amp, you can see we go from the 44 we were capable of having down to 30. But installing this with the correct polarity takes it from 7 up to 14. These are basically just the reverse of mods in every way. They still give you and also your entire squad a benefit, and you'll get your squad's aura as a benefit to you. But these actually give you points instead of taking them away from you, and they're very, very good to get. You can find these in the Nightwave shop, and you are also going to be guaranteed the physique aura at one of the early junctions in the game. But because that is a D polarity, that is only going to give you 5 points, but getting 5 points is better than nothing. But if you can find a way to get a matching polarity, that's going to be really good for every single starter. I would say that which one exactly you're getting in terms of auras isn't really going to matter early on. Eventually, you will get to the really good auras, such as Steel Charge or Corrosive Projection or Energy Siphon. But I wouldn't worry about that early on. Just getting one that matches is going to go a really long way. So, moving on, we in general here just have kind of a baseline build, and I'm going to go over what these different things do as we have a multitude of different effects. So, we have Redirection, which is plus 27% shield capacity. This does exactly what it sounds like. We go from 555 shields at rank 30 up to 706 shields. This makes us more survivable. The more ranks you put into Redirection, the more survivable you're going to be, and this mod is going to be one of the very first ones that you get. I will say, specifically for the starter Excalibur, you probably would want to go Vitality instead. This is going to increase health instead of shields. And of course, it's going to do essentially the same thing. This Vitality is a bit more leveled up, so it gives 45%. So I go from 280 to 407 health. But that's really the thing. For Volt and Mag, generally they both really want Redirection instead, and a couple levels of this go a long way in making you more survivable. Otherwise, we also have Stretch, which is plus 45% ability range. This, plain and simple, makes it so that any ability you use that is affected by range, which is honestly most of them, is going to have a bigger range. You can see that by hovering over the ability Pull. I have a 36-meter range on this now, which I can pull a ton of enemies all into a ball in front of me, which is very useful. But removing this mod puts me down to 25 meters. Adding 10 meters to an ability is really good, as you might imagine, and just makes you more effective against more enemies. In addition, and very similarly, we have Continuity, which is plus 30% ability duration. Notably, an ability like Pull, not affected by duration at all. But other abilities, such as Magnetize, will have a duration that is going to be affected by this. You can see up here, I'm actually at a negative duration, and that is because of a fleeting expertise. So early on in the CPR, you're going to see where you can farm corrupted mods. This is one of the corrupted mods, and this has two different effects on it. The hugely positive effect of plus 50% ability efficiency, which, as you can see at the top of here, affects the drain of this ability, lowering this down to only 6.5 energy when combined with the additional 25% we're getting from Streamline. We get only 1/4 cost abilities, which is also the maximum you can lower the cost of abilities. So we're only having to pay 6 energy instead of the 25 Pull would normally cost, making it so we can cast much more often. That is, of course, at the cost of half of our duration. For abilities that's not a downside for, like Pull, this is incredibly good, but keep in mind that in some cases that is going to be a downside. Notably, for Mag, usually instead of Continuity, because I don't care too much about duration on her, I'd go something like Intensify for more ability strength, which is going to make our abilities do more damage. You can see this going from its original damage of 300 up to 360 damage in order to kill more enemies, though mostly we'll be using an ability like Crush for the actual killing part, doing significantly more damage. Regardless, for both Excalibur and Volt, I would suggest you go more towards duration as what you're looking for, because you're going to need the duration for their abilities much more so than Mag needs duration for hers. So going up to at least 80% with the addition of continuity is definitely suggested while you're starting out. And I find that all the starters don't really need more strength. That being said, if you're really enjoying your starter a lot, and you do decide to invest in a Roken reactor in them, installing Intensify on every single one of them is just going to make them all better. And then, of course, you can get into more different mods after that, such as Mobilize. Mobilize is going to make you faster as you're bullet jumping around, and just also be generally useful. Adding Vitality and Redirection to make you more survivable, and those types of things are going to be good additions to your early kit. In addition to that, we should talk about Equilibrium. This is a special effect mod, which is health pickups give plus 50% energy, energy pickups give plus 50% health. This essentially makes it so that anytime you pick up health, you get energy, and anytime you pick up energy, you get health. All three of the starter Warframes don't have an inherent way to heal themselves. So this gives you healing that's just going to be happening throughout the entirety of a mission as you do what you want to do, which is use your abilities and pick up energy. This is just generally good survivability for you. Also, big enemies that glow, they're called Eximus, will always drop 2 health orbs and 1 energy orb, and this essentially doubles the amount of energy at this rank that you're going to get from those enemies, allowing you to use your abilities a whole lot more whenever you defeat them, making using your abilities to defeat them usually profitable instead of a net negative for you. That's generally early game what you kind of want to go for in terms of your first Warframe. These are all mods from the tutorial, with the exception of Fleeting Expertise. This will work great for you if you don't have Fleeting yet, but in terms of farming the corrupted mods, which I do have a guide on, and I would highly suggest for new players once you get to Mars, you should be going for this pretty early, as it's amazing for all the starter Warframes. There's also a multitude of excellent mods that you can find there, such as Overextended, which has plus range, minus strength, and things get deeper from there. But in general, this is kind of the build that I would suggest for all of the starters, with some variety of continuity or Intensify, depending on not only your taste, but on which specific starter you are. Otherwise, this should be pretty generic for all of them. Now, let's get into the much more complicated stuff with modding, which is talking about weapons and the way the mods interact with each other to make you do way more damage. So, for that, this is a really good early build that you can put together as a newer player. This is the Vectus. You'll note that the Vectus is actually on my optionals and is one of the best weapons that new players can craft. It is Mastery Rank 2, which means you're going to get it very, very early. And it's also not particularly expensive to build, and I have a full guide on where you can find those resources in order to acquire this weapon early. For that, as you can see here, the capacity is 0 of 60, which means I have put an Orokin Catalyst in this, but that is mostly for the purposes of being able to show you how we're getting where we're going with these weapons and why those things matter. So, as you can see here, we have about 1,800 total damage. And then, of course, we have critical stats, which have a pretty clear multiplier for how much more damage we're going to get whenever we hit a critical hit, which we have a 62% chance to hit. In terms of basic damage, you really don't need to care too much about these damage types. Early game, they're not really going to matter. However, I will explain how elementals work. So, let's jump into a blank build. So at blank stats, you can see what we're working up to, and you can see that our total damage is only 225. Now, looking at the actual numbers on a lot of these mods, it might be hard to imagine how we're getting to that 1,800 number if we're just adding things like Serration, which is 100% damage. And then on top of that, adding things like Malignant Force and this Cryo Rounds, which are this Cryo Rounds, which is also about 100% damage. And then finally adding in Split Chamber, which is multi-shot, which is double damage, of course, whenever we shoot 2 bullets. Because it's shooting multiple bullets, that's what multi-shot does. Instead of firing 1 bullet, you fire 2. So with just this 100% more damage and then another 100% more damage, these things come together to get us to that 1800 number. And I want to explain how that is. So removing split chamber, which is plus 90%, you're going to see that cuts our damage in half, and that makes sense. 2 bullets, double damage. However, mods in Warframe are either additive or multiplicative. And what that means is that if two things are multiplicative, you want about even amounts of them to go up at the same time. And if things are additive, you would rather diversify unless you're getting extremely large numbers. What I mean by that is if I remove Malignant Force and Cryo rounds, you'll notice that our damage is cut in half once again from that 800-ish to down to just like 450-ish from the 105 from Serration. At the beginning of this, you can see 225. And if we add in the Cryo rounds and this Malignant Force for the 60 and then the 45, you'll notice that we're back to that 461 total damage because these add up to 105 and this Serration is 105. So they add effectively the same amount of damage to what we're doing, but these are just elementals. Whenever you add this 105, it is also increasing these because these are multiplicative bonuses. Regular just damage and elementals multiply each other to get a much greater number. In addition to that, that is the same thing that multi-shot will do because you're shooting 2 bullets. This one's much easier to understand, but whenever you hit that 90% chance, you fire 2 bullets and that doubles your damage once again to get you where you're going. In addition to that, whenever you crit, and one of the reasons that crits are so good, this multiplier will do the same thing. It takes this 1800 and will just double it on a crit once again, of course getting you to greater and greater heights of damage. So the main thing to keep in mind whenever you're modding any new weapon is that you don't just want to stack every elemental that you can and just elemental, adding just every single one, like the cryo rounds, or well, we're already using that, but just adding all these different elementals that it allows you to add isn't going to be as good. As you can see, our damage here is only 1400, and these are 2 mods that add up to more than this Serration, which is only 105. These 2 are not as good damage-wise because they're not multiplicative. They're not multiplying everything else that you're doing. So that's why we tend to diversify what we're adding in, and adding things like Point Strike and, of course, Vital Sense, which is going to take us from that 2x multiplier up to a 4.4 multiplier whenever we crit, is going to make us crit much, much harder, of course, and also just be much more damage than we could ever get by adding even more elementals than this, because 4.4x damage on this is just, even at a 60% of the time, is just not going to be, the damage increase is just not, like you can see here, we go from 1800 to almost 3000, of course, but, 1800 times 4, we're looking at, tens of thousands of damage once you count headshots and things like that. So mostly, the big important thing about weapon modding is you want to increase your damage in diverse ways by doing either multi-shot, damage, elementals, and crits. Some weapons, of course, aren't going to have good stats for crits, and in those cases, usually adding elementals is going to be just fine. Weapons with like 5% crit, you're not going to add these because it's just too inconsistent and it's not going to be great for you. But whenever you're looking at a weapon that has like 25% crit chance, usually very worth it to go in on that because most of the time, you're going to be critting the enemy and doing significantly more damage. Hopefully that's given you just kind of a good general understanding of how this works. And there's one more thing to talk about, which you'll see in my kind of final beginner build, and that is mods like Hunter Munitions. So this brings us into statuses, which we're going to talk about. So Hunter Munitions is a mod that is in here. This has a 30% chance to apply slash, which is what that symbol means, on critical hits. That's the important part of this mod. Don't worry about the bottom. So basically, this makes it so anytime I crit, 30% of the time, I also apply a slash proc. Procs have a lot of different things that they do. If you can get your hands on Hunter Munitions, this is one of the best mods in the game because slash procs are one of the best procs in the game. And the TLDR for what slash procs do is they do a ton of damage when they happen that ignores enemy armor. I'm not going to go into it any more than that because it's just not necessary here, but you want slash procs. So mods like this, even though they don't strictly increase damage, can also be very good. So don't just write mods off if they don't just increase damage. But in general, it's just worth noting that there are mods like this. Now, let's talk about the rest of what we're getting elementally and what you need to worry about in terms of elements. So, from what we've got here, we can just go ahead and type in cold and grab a cryo rounds. Then we can type in toxin and we can grab infected clip here. These are our basic elemental mods, which is toxin and cold. And you can see on the left here that this turns into viral damage, which is cold plus toxin. These elemental combinations are available for all of the different elements. So if we go in here and type in heat, we can also add heat. However, you'll see that heat is separate. You can only combine 2 elements together, and then you'll still get a separated element afterward. And that is based on the order in which you have them, read from top to bottom and left to right. And that's what you're going to get. So if I take Hellfire and I move it over here, instead the heat and the cold will combine, and I'll get blast, and my toxin will be left by itself. And if I take this toxin and I move it ahead, then we're going to get the heat and the toxin to turn into gas, and then we're going to have the cold by itself. That's how elemental combining works. In terms of the combinations you're going to be likely to use, the really good combination that you can use on everything and pretty much just set it and forget it and just leave it is you include viral, which is just an excellent damage type that increases your damage very drastically. And then if you have extra room for more elementals, adding heat is pretty much always a good idea. If you can only fit one elemental, either toxin or heat are excellent by themselves. Toxin entirely ignores shields and has a damage over time effect, of course. And heat will take down enemy armor by a significant chunk, making them much weaker, and also do damage over time by itself. So if you have to pick just one elemental alone as you're leveling up a weapon, choosing either toxin or heat is generally going to be correct. That's not to say there aren't situations where you might want just cold by itself, or even the elemental we have not mentioned yet, which is electricity. But electricity is usually if you're going to use it, and especially if you just don't have a toxin mod yet, or rather if you don't have a cold mod yet, you can combine this with toxin and get corrosive, which is also pretty good. So if you don't have your cold mods yet, adding electricity, if you happen to have that to your toxin mods, is also good. And if you don't have a toxin mod yet, adding heat and cold together is also going to be just fine. In general, though, before you get to actually much more difficult content in Warframe, what elementals you're actually using aren't going to matter too much. And if you are having trouble, it's better to just ask somebody what element you should be using, as enemies just have different weaknesses to certain things. And we're not going to go over exactly how weaknesses work in that video, because it's a bit of a deep dive, but I'll have another video later talking more about what these things actually really do, getting into the real math of it all. However, there's one more thing that we should talk about, and that is melee weapons, namely the bow. So the bow you get from the tutorial. If you did not pick the bow, I would really suggest building it anyway. It's not particularly expensive to build or anything, being one of like the earlier weapons you can put together. And of course, coming from the tutorial. But I just wanted to talk about a build that can get new players before you get to things like the Vectus and all that to a very, very, very strong place. That being this build. So 3 of these mods are absolutely guaranteed for you to get. You'll get Clashing Forest from the very first junction that you complete, and this functions basically like an aura mod, except with a few extra effects. This gives you mod points. You can see going up to 34 total from what would normally be 30. And this also makes it so you have a special move set. This will change your move set, changing out the stances and so on and so forth. But the important thing is that Clashing Forest is a very good stance that you're given early and can use to increase your damage because it is a good stance. In addition to that, you'll have Pressure Point early. This is just 100% or 120% melee damage, which is quite strong. And then Northwind, because we have one of those D polarities to put this in, is 90% cold damage that comes in really cheap at only 6 points because this weapon does come with that D polarity to reduce the cost. In addition to that, once you get your hands on Fever Strike, this will mean you can create viral damage, which is then going to make this quite a strong weapon. And with those leftover points, we can add Reach for more range, making it easier to hit enemies from farther away, and of course to hit multiple enemies at the same time, multiplying our damage by virtue of that. Hopefully, this has been quite helpful in terms of getting you started in Warframe and understanding very basically how mods work. realistically, what you're mainly going to want to take away from this in the grand scope is add your basic damage mod, add some elementals. Multi-shot, if you have it, is extremely good. And then beyond that, crits are going to be really powerful for you. But yeah, that's the basic modding overview. Hopefully this has been helpful. And hopefully you guys are enjoying the critical progression route and getting through the game, well, probably very easily, I would hope. All right, so we're about to be into the thick of it with a lot of videos coming out. Thank you for your patience, everyone. And also, of course, as usual, thank you to the patrons, Alex Parnham, Angel SBM, Arbiter Daydream, Nuven, Plotomatic, Brandon Coggin, Brutus Salazar, Dylan Dworsky, Ethrain, Hafan, James Harthorn, JC4 Science, John Lobdell, Joshua Adams, Luzanth, Mikkelkel, Minty Ginja, Michta, Nerve, Ramoxidate, Tamrielic Wastelander, The Coupon of Death, Tomeworm, Waifu Wars, and Zeraphir, and of course to all of the $5 patrons as well. It is hugely appreciated with us getting into big free-to-play times, which should hopefully be excellent. Sorry if guides are a little floody on the inbox side, but it'll be a nice change of pace perhaps.